Nathaniel Vane banished his wife before the rain had dried upon their wedding carriage. He gave her a ruined mill, 4 damp rooms, and the clear understanding that he never intended to visit. By the first frost, 47 families would owe their survival to the woman he had discarded. This is a story of an unwanted bride, a proud man brought to his knees, and the difference between possessing a house and earning the right to call it home. The first thing Beatrice noticed about Greycross Mill was the smell. Wet timber, spoiled grain, and river mud pressed through the carriage door before the footman opened it. Rain struck the roof in hard September needles. Beyond the glass, a black water wheel leaned over the stream like the broken ribs of some enormous animal. The second thing she noticed was that her husband would not look at her. Nathaniel, the 7th Duke of Aldercombe, sat opposite her in a dark traveling coat, with one gloved hand resting on his silver-headed cane. He had spoken fewer than 20 words since the church. None had been tender. At the wedding breakfast, while 40 guests pretended not to listen, he had informed her that Aldercourt was not prepared to receive a duchess. Now the carriage stood before a building with cracked windows and a roof bowed under moss. "Your Grace," Beatrice said, "is this where I am to wait until Aldercourt is prepared?" His jaw tightened. At 34, Nathaniel possessed the severe beauty of a portrait made to frighten heirs into obedience. Black hair, a straight nose, and gray eyes that seemed colder when ashamed. "This is Greycross House," he replied. "It formed part of your marriage settlement. The settlement called it a furnished residence." Then the lawyers were generous with the word furnished. The rain filled the silence between them. On the front step, a thin old man held a lantern beneath a leaking umbrella. Behind him waited a maid no older than 17, and a boy with bare ankles blue from cold. Beatrice folded her hands over the plain traveling gown her father had ordered before his death. "How long shall I remain here?" Nathaniel looked at last, though not with the honesty she had asked from him. "You wanted security. Your uncle wanted his debts settled. I required the capital attached to your trust. We have each received what was promised." That was not an answer. "It is the only one I have." She understood then. The ruined mill was not a temporary inconvenience. It was the room into which he meant to lock the consequence of his own bargain. "And Lady Sabine?" Beatrice asked. His hand closed around the cane. Lady Sabine Harcourt had stood in ivory silk at the wedding breakfast, dressed more richly than the bride. She had lifted Nathaniel's cup to her lips and smiled over its rim. Beatrice had needed no whispered explanation from the guests. "Lady Sabine is not your concern. A mistress who drinks from my husband's cup before my wedding cake is cut has made herself my concern. Take care." Beatrice leaned forward. Her voice remained level, which appeared to anger him more than tears might have done. "No, Your Grace, you must take care. I entered the church knowing this was an arrangement. I did not expect love. I did expect the dignity of the name you required me to bear." For one breath something moved behind his expression, then pride smothered it. "You are the Duchess of Aldercombe. No one can deny you that." He opened the carriage door himself. Cold rain swept in. "A title is not a welcome," she said. "It will have to suffice." She stepped down without offering him her hand. Mud swallowed the heel of her boot. The boy on the step stared at the small traveling case that contained everything she had been permitted to bring from London. Nathaniel remained beneath the carriage roof. "This place will never be my home," Beatrice told him. "That," he said, "is a matter of no importance." He left before she crossed the threshold. The carriage wheels threw brown water across the wall, and the crest of Aldercombe vanished into the rain. Beatrice stood with it running from the brim of her bonnet. She did not call him back. The old man lowered his umbrella. "Your Grace, I am Gideon Bell. I kept the mill for 31 years before Mr. Mordaunt ordered it closed. And these, my granddaughter Ruth, The boy is Owen Cartwright. His mother cleans here when there is coal enough to make drying anything worthwhile. There was no coal. Inside, the entrance hall smelled of damp plaster. A dead rook lay in the grate. Rainwater had collected in 3 cooking pots beneath a hole in the ceiling, and a green stain climbed the wallpaper to the height of Beatrice's shoulder. Her furnished residence contained 2 chairs, 1 narrow bed, a cracked washstand, and a dining table propped upon a brick. On that table lay 47 wooden discs threaded onto a cord. Beatrice picked one up. A tenant's name had been burned into the front. On the back was a number. What are these? Gideon's lantern trembled. Milling tallies, Your Grace. 1 for every household bound to the Greycross farms. They used to bring grain here and pay the miller's toll in flour. Since the wheel failed, they must cart it 9 miles to Dunley. Why did the wheel fail? The old miller looked towards the dark passage leading to the machinery. Because someone removed the iron gudgeon from the axle 3 nights before harvest. Stole it? No, Your Grace. He glanced at the boy, threw it into the mill pond. Owen saw the splash. The boy's lower lip whitened beneath his teeth. Beatrice closed her fingers around the wooden tally. Who ordered the mill closed? Mr. Silas Mordaunt, His Grace's land agent. There were questions Nathaniel had refused to answer, and questions he did not yet know existed. Beatrice set her wet gloves beside the tallies. Show me the wheel. But the turn that would change Greycross did not begin with the wheel. It began with a locked grain room and the sound of a hungry child breathing on the other side of its door. Gideon led Beatrice through the mill by lantern light. The grinding floor stretched beneath beams furred with dust. 2 millstones sat motionless inside their wooden casings. Their grooves had been cut in curved patterns to shear grain towards the center, but mold had gathered in the furrows. Leather belts hung slack from the ceiling. Rats had eaten a hole through one of the flower shoots. The water wheel stood outside the rear wall. Half its paddles were missing. The stream rushed beneath it, swift with rain and uselessly powerful. Beatrice laid 1 palm against the axle. The timber was wet, but not rotten through. My father built pumping engines, she said. Before illness took his hands, he taught me to hear when a machine was lying. Gideon frowned. Machines lie, Your Grace? Only when men make them. She crouched beside the bearing box. Fresh iron marks scarred the old wood. The missing gudgeon had not worked loose. It had been levered out with care. A knock sounded from inside the mill, not at the front door. 3 soft blows came from behind a narrow oak door beneath the stairs. Owen moved first. Ma'am, the door was locked. Gideon produced no key. So Beatrice took a rusted poker from the hearth and drove its end beneath the latch. Her first attempt jarred her wrists. On the third, the wood split. Inside the grain room, Mary Cartwright sat upon a sack with both arms around a little girl. Her face was gray with exhaustion. 6 other women crowded behind her. At their feet lay empty biscuits. Forgive us, Your Grace, Mary whispered. Mr. Mordaunt said trespassers would be taken before the magistrate. We heard the carriage and thought he had returned. Why are you here? Mary pointed to the far wall. Grain filled the room almost to the window ledge. Dozens of sacks bore the Aldercombe crest. That is our barley, another woman said, and our wheat. He collected the tithe and the rent grain together. Said it had spoiled, and none could be returned. Beatrice thrust her hand between the ties of the nearest sack. The kernels were dry, hard, and clean. Owen watched every movement. My sister has had onion water for 2 days. The little girl hid her face in her mother's skirt. Gideon removed his cap. They cannot grind what remains at home. Dunley charges coin, not toll, and Mr. Mordaunt has forbidden credit. On whose authority? No one answered. They did not need to. Beatrice walked to the outer door. A notice had been nailed to it beneath the Duke's printed crest. By order of his grace, all grain stored upon the Aldercombe estate was to be conveyed to Hawksby and Sons before Michaelmas. Any tenant in arrears would surrender the winter lease of his cottage, 47 households. 47 tallies. She pulled the notice free. The seal looked proper, but her father had taught her that force revealed weakness. She bent the paper near the wax. A clean crack opened through the crest. Mixed into the red was a thread of black. The cheap lamp soot used when sealing wax was stretched by dishonest clerks. "When does Mr. Mordaunt return?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning. Then tonight we count every sack." Mary stared. "Your Grace, the notice carries your husband's name." "So do I." They worked until the rain softened. Ruth found candles. Gideon climbed the grain stacks and called down each mark, while Beatrice wrote the numbers in a school copybook. 112 sacks. Enough, if carefully milled, to keep the village from hunger until the late winter markets. At midnight, Beatrice divided bread from her traveling hamper among the children. She took none herself. A duchess's wedding supper became 8 small pieces on an old flour board. Near dawn, Gideon placed a narrow iron object on the table. "Found it in the pond last week," he said. I was afraid to say. The gudgeon was heavy, orange with rust, and entirely serviceable beneath it. Beatrice turned it towards the candle. A strip of blue wool clung to a sharp edge. Mr. Mordaunt's estate livery was blue. He arrived at 9 in a polished phaeton, dressed as if mud were an insult that applied only to poorer men. Silas Mordaunt was 45, narrow through the chest and smooth in the manner of a blade kept inside velvet. 2 bailiffs followed him into the mill. He stopped when he saw the grain-room door, hanging broken from one hinge. "Your Grace," he said, "I was not informed you would take up residence so quickly. Nor was I informed that my husband had ordered grain taken from hungry tenants." Mordaunt smiled with patient regret. "Estate management can appear harsh to those unfamiliar with it. Then make me familiar." He requested the notice. Beatrice held it beyond his reach. "Hawksby and Sons paid in advance against the harvest," he explained. "The estate has obligations. His Grace approved the arrangement in London. Show me his signed instruction." "The correspondence is private. I am his wife." "Precisely." The smile sharpened. "Not his steward." Gideon moved, but Beatrice raised one hand. "These sacks remain here until I have written to the Duke. They leave at noon." "No." The word struck the dusty rafters and returned. Mordaunt looked towards the bailiffs. "Your Grace has endured an unsettled night. I should hate for village gossip to suggest the new Duchess had become confused by it. And I should hate for a magistrate to learn that an agent used a false seal upon his master's order." For the first time his expression emptied. Beatrice placed the cracked wax on the flour board. "Lamp soot. I expect you thought no one here would know the difference." He recovered quickly. "A clerk's economy proves nothing." "It proves enough to delay the carts." "Until noon," he said. "After that I shall execute his Grace's business, even if I must execute it around you." When the phaeton departed, Gideon let out the breath he had held. He will return with more men. Beatrice examined the silent wheel. "Then we must make his grain more troublesome to remove." "How?" She set the recovered gudgeon on the table. "We grind it." By 11 the whole village knew. Men arrived carrying adzes, hammers, wedges, and one precious auger. Women brought lantern oil, rope, and baskets of potatoes. A wheelwright named Thomas Reed inspected the cracked paddles and declared the work impossible in less than a fortnight. Beatrice asked what could be done in 2 hours. "We can seat the gudgeon," he said. "The wheel will still spill half the water." "Half the water is more than none." She removed her bonnet, tied a flour cloth over her hair, and climbed onto the wheel platform. Rain had made the boards slick. Nathaniel's wedding ring caught upon a splinter, so she pulled it free and placed it in her pocket. No one mistook the gesture. They drove the iron into the axle while Gideon packed the bearing with tallow. Millers had long used animal fat to keep wooden machinery from burning where it turned. The smell rose thick and greasy beneath the cleaner scent of rain. Thomas replaced 3 paddles with oak boards stripped from the ruined stable. Ruth and Mary stitched the torn grain sacks. Owen ran messages until his bare feet bled, then refused to sit until Beatrice ordered him into her own boots. At 12:30, 6 wagons bearing Hawksby's mark appeared on the northern road. The wheel had not moved. Mordaunt rode ahead of the carts. 12 hired men walked behind him. Beatrice stood on the bank with mud to her knees. "Open the head gate," she told Gideon. He hauled the lever. Water surged into the race, struck the repaired paddles, and burst white through every gap. The wheel shuddered. The axle groaned once, twice, and remained still. Mordaunt dismounted. A spirited little exhibition. Beatrice climbed down, seized the long iron turning bar, and fitted it into the axle socket. Thomas joined her, then Mary, then Gideon, though his hands shook. "You cannot oppose the Duke's order with a broken machine," Mordaunt called. Beatrice leaned her weight against the bar. "Watch me." The wood gave a cracking complaint. 1 inch. 2. Water struck the paddles again. The wheel lurched, flinging mud across Mordaunt's polished boots. Above them, the first belt snapped taut. 1 millstone began to turn. The sound was low and immense, stone against grain. Work returning to a place condemned to silence. The villagers cheered. Mordaunt did not. "If you mill property pledged to Hawksby, your grace, you will answer for the value. Send the account to me. A married woman cannot contract against her husband's estate." Beatrice wiped rain from her eyes. The Act of last year permits a wife to keep earnings made by her own trade. "This mill was named for my use in the settlement, and I shall charge the customary toll. Every farthing earned here will be separate property. It was not the whole truth of the law. The new act was narrow, untested, and despised by many men who benefited from the old doctrine of coverture. But uncertainty could be a weapon when held with confidence. Mordaunt studied the moving wheel. His grace will put an end to this. Then he may come and do it himself. He mounted without another word. The empty wagons turned in the lane. By dusk, Greycross had produced its first sack of flour in 4 years. Beatrice carried it to Mary Cartwright's cottage. 46 other households received smaller measures that night, each portion recorded beside its wooden tally. The flour was coarse and flecked with bran. To Owen's little sister, it might have been sugar. Nathaniel's reply arrived 3 days later. The envelope bore his private seal. Beatrice placed it beside her cold tea and continued calculating the yield of the remaining grain. She opened it only after every household had received enough for 1 week. "Madam, you will cease interfering in estate business and permit Mr. Mordaunt to fulfill his duties." Greycross was provided as a residence, not as an opportunity for public spectacle. "I shall come at the end of October to settle the matter. Aldercombe." There was no inquiry regarding her health, no mention of the broken roof or empty coal house, not even the courtesy of her name. Beatrice turned the page over. It was blank. She fed the letter to the kitchen fire, but kept the envelope. A seal, she had learned, could tell one more truth than the man who pressed it. During the following weeks, Greycross changed by degrees that would have been invisible to anyone who visited only once. The roof still leaked, but into 2 pots rather than 3. The great wheel still knocked at every 7th turn, but it turned from dawn until the evening bell. Fine flour dust settled over everything, softening black gowns, red hands, and old grudges beneath the same pale coat. Beatrice established 3 rules. No household would be denied milling for want of coin. The toll would be 1 measure in 16, lower than Dunley's charge, and every weight would be checked upon the brass balance before the owner who brought it. Gideon objected to the second rule. "The roof will not mend itself, your grace." "No, but hungry men cannot mend it either." She sold the emerald brooch Nathaniel's solicitor had delivered on the morning of the wedding. The jeweler in York paid £82, less than half its declared value. Beatrice used £12 for slate, 9 for seasoned oak, 5 for a new belt, and 3 shillings to buy Owen his first pair of boots. The remaining money she deposited under the name Beatrice Vane, mill proprietor. The banker asked twice whether her husband consented. She placed a printed copy of the Married Women's Property Act upon his desk and asked whether he wished to be the first man in Yorkshire sued under it. The account was opened before luncheon. That afternoon a letter arrived from Lady Sabine. "My dear Duchess, Nathaniel tells me you have found an occupation among the flour sacks. Country air is said to improve women of nervous temperament. Do be careful that industry does not make you common. A man may forgive an inconvenient wife. Society never forgives a ridiculous one." Beatrice folded the letter around the strip of blue wool recovered from the axle and locked both inside the mill's iron cash box. Lady Sabine had provided an important detail without meaning to. Nathaniel had told her about the mill. He had shared his wife's humiliation as drawing-room amusement. That wound went deeper than abandonment. At the end of the 5th week, frost silvered the mill roof. 47 tenant families possessed flour, but Mordaunt had begun a different siege. Coal carts were diverted. The blacksmith received orders not to extend Greycross credit. 3 men repairing the mill were warned that their cottages could be called for arrears. Then came the eviction notices. They were delivered after dark, one beneath every tenant door. Rent was demanded by the 1st of December, though estate custom allowed payment after the winter livestock sales. Failure would end each yearly tenancy at Christmas. 47 notices. 47 families. At the bottom of each, beneath a perfect red seal, stood Nathaniel's name. Mary Cartwright brought hers to the mill with hands so cold she could not unfold it. "My husband died repairing His Grace's West Bridge. We have paid rent here for 14 years. Owen stood beside her in his new boots. He stared at Beatrice with the trust of a child who believed a duchess could command winter to wait. "Will he put us on the road?" he asked. Beatrice examined the wax. Pure red this time. No soot, no flaw. The signature appeared genuine. For the first time since the carriage vanished into the rain, she doubted the ground beneath her. Then Gideon entered carrying a flour sack that had never passed through Greycross. "Found it behind Mordaunt's granary," he said. "You ought to see the mark." The sack bore the Aldercombe crest. Beneath it, in fresh black ink, Hawksby and Sons had stamped a shipping destination. Calais. The estate agent was not merely collecting rent. He was stripping the village before the truth could return from across the channel. And according to the York newspaper lying open beside Beatrice's hand, the Duke of Aldercombe had sailed for France 2 days before signing the notices in Yorkshire. Beatrice sent 3 telegrams before sunset. The first went to Nathaniel's solicitor in London, requesting confirmation of the dates on which the Duke had placed his seal in the agent's custody. The second went to Hawksby and Sons, offering to purchase every disputed sack at the price originally advanced. The third crossed the Channel to the Hôtel des Deux Rois in Calais. "Your name has been used to evict 47 families. If this was your order, return and say it before them. If it was not, return before the man who gave it destroys the proof." She signed it Beatrice, not Duchess of Aldercombe. Mordaunt came the following morning with a constable. He carried an accusation of theft against Gideon Bell and an inventory claiming that 29 sacks of estate grain had disappeared from his granary. Gideon's face drained of color when the constable produced a pair of iron handcuffs. "The grain never entered your granary," Beatrice said. "It was seized from the tenants and stored here. Her Grace is mistaken," Mordaunt replied. "Mr. Bell has encouraged that mistake for his own profit." "I have taken no profit," Gideon said. Then you will have no difficulty explaining the £7 found beneath your mattress." The old man stared at him. Beatrice understood before the constable did. "Search his room again. You will find blue wax upon the sill where your man entered." Mordaunt's eyes flicked towards her. It was enough to confirm the trap, but not enough to defeat it. The constable had a sworn complaint and money said to be stolen from the estate. He took Gideon by the arm. Owen blocked the door. He didn't do it. "Stand aside, lad." The boy planted both new boots on the threshold. Beatrice touched his shoulder. "Move for me, Owen." "But you said names had power." "They do." She looked at Mordaunt. "So do witnesses." She walked with Gideon to the magistrate's court 6 miles away. 23 villagers followed. Mary carried the copybook containing every sack mark and every measure of flour distributed. Thomas Reed carried the damaged gudgeon with blue wool still caught upon it. Ruth carried the £7 exactly as the constable had found them, wrapped in paper stamped by Mordaunt's own estate office. The magistrate was Sir Edmund Vale, a red-faced man who dined with Nathaniel twice a year and disliked embarrassment more than injustice. He refused to dismiss the charge, but the procession of witnesses made him unwilling to commit Gideon for trial. He released the miller upon a bond of £20. "Who will stand surety?" Sir Edmund asked. Beatrice removed the last piece of wedding jewelry she possessed, a pearl bracelet, and laid it upon his desk. "I will." Mordaunt gave a quiet laugh. "A wife's jewels belong to her husband." "Not this one," Beatrice said. "I purchased it with earnings from the mill yesterday morning." It was a plain river pearl bracelet. Ruth had bought for 1 shilling at the village market and sold to Beatrice for the same. Its value could not satisfy the bond. Its legal meaning could. Sir Edmund stared from the bracelet to the crowd outside his window. The Duchess's word will suffice. On the road home, Gideon said, "You wagered your name on mine." "No." "I wagered Sir Edmund's comfort against Mr. Mordaunt's lies." Yet the charge remained. So did the eviction notices. And that night someone poured sand into the mill's main bearing. The wheel screamed before dawn. Beatrice ran outside in her nightdress and boots. Gideon fought the headgate lever while sparks fell from the axle housing. Water drove the wheel against the grit until smoke climbed along the wet boards. "Release the brake!" Beatrice shouted. "It's jammed." She climbed over the guardrail. The wheel's paddles rose beside her, black and streaming. One blow could drag her beneath the platform. She reached the brake chain, wrapped it around her forearm, and pulled until the iron hook tore skin from her palm. The chain gave. The brake lifted. Gideon closed the headgate, and the wheel slowed with a final groan. Beatrice dropped to her knees. Blood ran from her hand onto the frost. A horse came hard down the lane. Nathaniel dismounted before the animal had fully stopped. He wore the same dark coat in which he had left her, now gray, with channel salt and road dust. For one instant he looked at the ruined wheel, the smoking bearing, and his wife kneeling barefoot beneath it. The authority fell out of his face. "Beatrice." It was the first time he had spoken her name. She stood without taking the hand he offered. "You are late." He looked at the blood on her palm. "Send for a doctor. The nearest surgeon charges 6 pence a mile. Mary, bring boiled water and the clean linen." Nathaniel caught the edge of the platform. "I said send for him, and I said the money is better spent upon bearing oil. You are my wife." Her gaze held his. "Only when it makes an order easier, it seems." The villagers had gathered in the lane. No one bowed. Nathaniel saw the eviction papers in their hands and the flour dust on their clothes. He saw Owen staring at him with undisguised hatred. "I did not sign those notices," Nathaniel said. Mary Cartwright stepped forward. "It is your name, your grace. It was used without my authority." "Your agent used it," Beatrice replied. "Your seal confirmed it. Your absence protected it." He flinched as if she had struck him. Mordaunt's phaeton appeared at the bend. The agent descended with a leather document case, tucked beneath his arm and surveyed the scene. "Your Grace," he said to Nathaniel, "thank God you have come. Her Grace's conduct has become dangerous. She has stolen pledged grain, obstructed lawful evictions, and incited the tenants against the estate." Nathaniel turned. "Did you issue those notices on your standing authority to recover arrears? Did you use my private seal, as I have done for 7 years? I asked whether you used it." Mordaunt lowered his voice. "The estate owes Hawksby £4,000 in December. You instructed me to find the money. The sale of unprofitable tenancies is the only course left." The number silenced the yard. Beatrice looked at Nathaniel. "Is that true?" He did not hide behind anger this time. "Yes, my father mortgaged 3 farms before his death. I borrowed against the harvest to prevent foreclosure. And you used my trust to pay the lender. Most of it. There it was, the bargain beneath the marriage, uglier, when spoken before the people who had unknowingly financed it with hunger." Mordaunt opened his case. "Her Grace has consumed grain pledged as security. If Hawksby calls the debt today, Aldercourt itself may be attached. Shut the mill, remove the agitators, and we may yet save your name." Nathaniel looked towards Beatrice. Her injured hand had soaked through the linen. The hem of her nightdress was dark with river mud. Behind her, the wheel stood silent again. "Bring every estate account to Greycross by noon," he told Mordaunt. "Your Grace, every account. The rent rolls, grain receipts, seal register, and Hawksby correspondence." Mordaunt's face hardened. "Those books cannot be moved in this weather. Then pray for sunshine." Nathaniel took the false eviction notice from Mary and tore it once through his own signature. "No family leaves an Aldercombe cottage before I have read the account myself." The villagers did not cheer. Trust did not return as quickly as a carriage from Calais. Mordaunt bowed. "As your Grace commands." He left with the document case still under his arm. Nathaniel remained at Greycross because the wheel needed hands, and Beatrice refused to leave it. The only habitable bed belonged to her. So Ruth placed blankets upon the kitchen settle. No servant undressed him. No fire waited in his chamber. He ate oat porridge from a chipped bowl and watched his wife direct the replacement of the ruined bearing. By afternoon, his black coat was white with flour. "You are holding the wrench incorrectly," Beatrice said. "It is a wrench. There cannot be many philosophies attached to it. There is the philosophy of turning the nut, and yours appears devoted to rounding it." Thomas Reed coughed into his sleeve to hide a laugh. Nathaniel changed his grip. When the workers paused, he found Beatrice alone in the grain room examining the seals upon the sacks. "You should have told me the house was unfit. You saw it. Not properly. No, you made certain of that." He rested both hands upon a sack. "I believed Mordaunt when he said the mill was sound enough for temporary residence. You wanted to believe him, yes. The admission was small and costly." Beatrice studied the black shipping mark. "Why did you marry me? You know why. I know why the solicitor advised it. I ask why you agreed." Nathaniel brushed flour from his sleeve, though each movement spread it farther. "Because my father left an estate held together by appearances. Because Sabine refused to marry a man whose roof and title might be sold in the same auction. Because your uncle offered £30,000 in exchange for your protection." Protection. Beatrice touched the bandage on her palm, an ambitious word for a leaking roof. "I was angry with every person who had cornered me, and you were the only one without power to strike back. So you struck first." Yes, outside the repaired wheel began to move. Its slow knocking entered the silence like a clock refusing to forgive either of them. Nathaniel drew a folded paper from his pocket. "Your telegram reached me at dinner. Sabine advised me to ignore it. Yet you came. I remembered the way you said my name had been used. Not your title, my name." He placed the paper between them. "I have spent years protecting it from scandal while allowing men to empty it of honor." Beatrice did not answer. "I am sorry," he said. The words did not mend the roof. They did not return the wedding breakfast or remove Lady Sabine's mouth from his cup. "I believe that you are," Beatrice replied. "I do not yet know what it changes." He accepted the sentence without protest. At noon the estate books did not arrive. At 2, Nathaniel sent a groom to Mordaunt's office. The door stood open. The grate was full of fresh ash, and every current account had vanished. At 4, Hawksby and Sons replied to Beatrice's telegram. They denied holding any lien upon tenant grain. Their advance had been secured against 3 named farms and guaranteed by a private bond signed by Silas Mordaunt. The agent had created 2 debts from 1 loan. At 5, Owen came running from the upper river with terror in his face. "The sluice keys are gone," he gasped, "and Mr. Mordaunt's blue horse is tied by the old reservoir." Gideon looked towards the clouded hills. "If he opens the upper gates, the mill race will not hold." Nathaniel crossed the yard. "How long, with this rain?" "An hour, perhaps less." Beatrice was already reaching for her coat. Nathaniel caught her uninjured wrist. "You stay here. The emergency brake must be released by hand before the flood reaches the wheel. Gideon cannot climb the frame. Then I shall do it. You held a wrench incorrectly 5 hours ago, and I have improved enormously." No one smiled. They divided the work. Thomas and the tenants packed the river doors with sandbags. Mary and Ruth moved grain to the upper floor. Gideon opened the lower bypass channel, an old stone cut intended to carry spring floods around the wheel. Beatrice and Nathaniel rode for the reservoir, with Owen between them on the saddle. Rain began halfway up the hill. By the time they reached the gatehouse, water poured over the reservoir lip in brown sheets. Mordaunt stood beside the winding gear with an axe in his hands. One gate was already open. The released water had turned the narrow stream into a moving wall. Below, the mill lamps burned as small gold points in the valley. "Close it," Nathaniel ordered. Mordaunt drove the axe through the timber housing. The winding chain fell loose. "You should have remained in France," he said. "You forged my authority. I preserved it. Your father left rot beneath every carpet, and you lacked the stomach to cut it away. 47 insolvent families or 1 ducal estate. The choice was obvious." "They were never insolvent," Beatrice said. "You falsified the toll weights and sold their grain twice. They were poor. Poverty is merely insolvency without paperwork." Owen slipped from the saddle. "You put the money in Mr. Bell's room." Mordaunt glanced at him, and Beatrice saw the decision form. "Run, Owen!" The agent lunged. Nathaniel struck his arm aside with the silver head of his cane, but the wet ground gave beneath both men. They fell against the gatehouse wall. The axe slid towards the reservoir. Beatrice seized Owen and pushed him behind the stone parapet. Mordaunt drove his shoulder into Nathaniel's chest. The cane broke. For one brutal instant, Nathaniel hung over the flooded channel with nothing beneath him but racing water. Beatrice caught the back of his coat. Owen caught Beatrice's skirt. Together they pulled until Nathaniel found the stones with one boot. Mordaunt ran for his horse. Nathaniel did not pursue him. He looked at the broken chain and the gate standing wide. "Can it be closed?" Beatrice shook her head. "Not before the water reaches Greycross. Then we go back." The first flood struck the mill 20 minutes later. It came as a sound before it came as water, a deep tearing roar that rolled through the valley. The head gate shuddered. River water climbed the sandbags, carrying branches, fence rails, and the white body of a drowned sheep. "Upper floor clear," Mary shouted from the window. The wheel accelerated. Every repaired paddle struck the water hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. The main belt whipped above the grinding floor. Gideon pulled the brake lever, but the chain snapped back and opened his cheek. "The lower bypass is blocked," Thomas cried. "There's a timber across the mouth." Beatrice looked through the rain. A felled ash tree had lodged across the stone channel, exactly where a man with an axe might have intended it to fall. If the bypass remained closed, the water would tear the wheel from the mill. If the wheel broke free, it would strike the tenant cottages downstream. "Clear the houses," Nathaniel ordered. "There is no time," Gideon said. The axle gave a sharp report. One iron strap split. Beatrice climbed onto the outer platform. "Where are you going?" Nathaniel shouted. "The wheel must be uncoupled from the main shaft. Then the frame may break without taking the wall. Tell me how. Pull the red pin when I lift the locking arm." The platform bucked beneath them. Nathaniel followed without permission, one hand gripping the rail and the other reaching for the red iron pin beside the axle. "When I say now," Beatrice called. She stepped over the shaft. The spinning wheel threw water into her face. The locking arm lay beyond it, less than 3 feet away, and separated by machinery powerful enough to crush bone. She knelt, pushed the heel of her bandaged hand beneath the lever, and felt the wound open. The arm did not move. Below them a cottage bell began ringing. One family had not escaped. "Again," Nathaniel said. They pushed together. Iron scraped against iron. The lever rose half an inch. "Now!" Nathaniel pulled the red pin. Nothing happened. "It is bent." The second axle strap split. The wheel shifted sideways, tearing 3 boards from the platform. Beatrice lost her footing. Nathaniel caught her around the waist as one boot struck the turning shaft. From the bank, Owen screamed her name. Nathaniel braced his body between Beatrice and the wheel. Water hammered his shoulders. The red pin remained lodged beneath his hand. "Go back!" she shouted. "No. If the frame goes, it will take us both." His face was inches from hers, stripped of rank, pride, and every convenient distance he had placed between them. "Then it takes us both." "That is not redemption. It is waste." The bluntness stopped him. Even there, with the river rising around them, Beatrice refused to make his sacrifice romantic. "What do you need?" he asked. "Your strength, not your life." She placed both his hands upon the pin, took the broken half of his cane from his belt, and wedged the silver head behind the bent iron. On 3, 1, 2, 3. The pin tore free. The locking arm flew upward. The main shaft uncoupled with a concussion that shook the mill. Freed from the machinery, the wheel surged in its frame, spinning wildly but no longer dragging the building apart. "Down!" Beatrice cried. They threw themselves across the platform as the upper brace snapped. The wheel tilted towards the river, struck the stone bank, and broke into 3 enormous sections. One vanished into the flood. Another lodged against the ash tree, blocking the bypass. For a breath the obstruction held, then the broken wheel's weight tore the tree free. Water burst through the bypass channel. The level around the mill dropped by inches, then by feet. The cottages downstream remained standing. The storm had spent Mordaunt's last weapon and uncovered his first. Wedged beneath the uprooted ash was a black document case. Owen saw it when the water receded. He scrambled down the bank before anyone could stop him and dragged it from the mud. The brass clasp bore Silas Mordaunt's initials. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, lay the missing estate books, the seal register, Hawksby's original bond, and a packet of receipts for grain shipped to Calais under Mordaunt's private account. There was also a list of 47 cottages, each valued for sale after eviction. Mordaunt had thrown the case into the bypass and felled the tree across it, intending the flood to bury both evidence and mill. Instead, the village gathered around Beatrice, while Nathaniel read every page aloud. At the bottom of the final receipt appeared a second signature, Lady Sabine Harcourt. She had introduced Mordaunt to the French buyer and received £1 from every ton shipped. The woman who had warned Beatrice against becoming common had profited from flour taken out of children's mouths. Hoofbeats sounded on the lane. Mordaunt returned with Sir Edmund, 2 constables, and a claim that the Duchess had deliberately destroyed ducal property. He stopped when he saw the open document case in Nathaniel's hands. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Beatrice walked towards him. Her hair had come loose. Blood marked the linen around her palm, and river water poured from her coat. Behind her stood every tenant Mordaunt had planned to remove. "You called poverty insolvency without paperwork," she said. "Here is your paperwork." Nathaniel gave the bond to Sir Edmund. Gideon presented the planted money. Thomas presented the sabotaged gudgeon. Owen identified the axe lying beside the reservoir gate. Mary placed 47 false eviction notices on the magistrate's carriage one by one. Mordaunt looked at Nathaniel. "Your Grace, consider what a public prosecution will do to your name." Nathaniel's gaze moved to Beatrice, and the words he had spoken in the wedding carriage returned between them. "A title is not a welcome. My name," he said, "has sheltered you long enough." He turned to the constables. "Take him." Mordaunt backed away. "You will lose Aldercourt." "Then I shall lose Stone," Nathaniel replied. "I will not purchase it with 47 human lives." The constables closed the irons around Mordaunt's wrists. Lady Sabine fled to Brussels before a warrant reached London. Her family repaid most of the commissions to avoid her return and public examination. Hawksby accepted the original debt schedule once Nathaniel surrendered his hunting lodge and 2 carriages as additional security. The sale caused gossip. For the first time, he allowed gossip to cost him something. Gideon's charge was dismissed. Sir Edmund apologized in a sentence so tangled that no one could find the apology inside it. But the court record was cleared. The eviction notices burned in the mill yard. Beatrice did not watch. She was in the grain room calculating timber for a new wheel. Nathaniel found her there at midnight. His left arm rested in a sling, and a bruise darkened one side of his face. He placed 3 documents upon the flour board. The first granted Greycross Mill and its water rights to trustees for Beatrice's sole use, beyond his creditors and his control. The second recognized the 47 tenancies for 7 years at the customary rent. The third offered her a legal separation with an income of £800 a year. Beatrice read each page. "You are giving me a door," she said. "I should have done so before I asked you to enter mine, and if I take it," his fingers tightened against the sling, "I shall not oppose you. Do you expect forgiveness because you have finally behaved justly? No. Do you expect me at Aldercourt? No. What do you expect?" Nathaniel looked around the damaged room, the wet sacks, the broken belt, the water line stained across the wall. "Nothing I have earned." Beatrice folded the separation paper. "Then begin with the roof." He blinked. "The west slates lift whenever the wind turns. If you mean to remain until the wheel is rebuilt, you may make yourself useful." Hope rose too quickly in his face, and she stopped it with one look. "This is not forgiveness. I know. It is work. I believe I have improved with a wrench. You have not." For the first time, she almost smiled. Winter settled over Greycross. Nathaniel remained. He learned to rise when the mill bell sounded at 5. He learned that flour dust found its way inside cuffs, collars, boots, and pride. He sold the silver-headed replacement cane his London valet ordered and used the money to glaze the cottage windows. He attended every rent meeting but sat at the side of the room until Beatrice asked for him. When men addressed their questions only to the Duke, he answered, "The mill belongs to her Grace. Ask her." The village listened. Beatrice did not measure him by apologies. She measured him by February mornings when ice locked the head gate, and he entered the water beside Thomas to break it. She measured him by the letter he wrote publicly clearing every tenant of arrears created through Mordaunt's false weights. She measured him by the day Lady Sabine's solicitor offered silence in exchange for destroying her signed receipts, and Nathaniel sent the receipts to the prosecutor. He did not ask Beatrice to praise him for any of it. The new wheel turned on the first day of March. It was larger than the old one. built from seasoned oak and bound with iron paid for by Flower, sold under Beatrice's contract with a York infirmary. Greycross had earned £196 through the winter. After repairs and grain purchases, enough remained to establish a village fund against illness and failed harvests. All 47 families still held their homes. At the spring tenancy supper, Mary Cartwright placed a loaf before Beatrice. Owen had shaped the dough himself. It leaned to one side and bore the imprint of a thumb. "Best flour in Yorkshire," he declared. "A very doubtful loaf," Nathaniel said. Owen considered him. "You can have the burnt end. An honor." Laughter moved around the table. Nathaniel received it without injury. After the others left, Beatrice walked with him to the mill door. The separation document had remained unsigned in her desk for 4 months. "The roof no longer leaks," she said. "Thomas deserves the credit. You fell through it twice. A contribution of sorts." She looked towards Greycross House. Warm light filled the repaired windows. It no longer resembled the punishment Nathaniel had chosen for her. Nor did Aldercourt wait behind him as a prize she was expected to desire. "On our wedding day," he said, "you told me this place would never be your home. I remember. I told you it did not matter." He paused. "It mattered more than anything." Beatrice touched the plain ring upon her finger. She had begun wearing it again, not because the vows had been repaired, but because they were finally being lived. Nathaniel did not reach for her. "May I come home?" It was not a duke's command. It was a man's request. "There is room," she said, "if you mean to stay." "I do." She took his hand and led him across the threshold behind them. The oak wheel turned beneath the first white hawthorn blossoms, and from the 47 cottages along the river came the warm scent of bread. Thank you for staying with Beatrice through every bitter mile of her journey, from an unwanted bride in a ruined mill to the woman who saved an entire village without surrendering her dignity. If her courage and Nathaniel's hard-earned redemption moved you, please like this video. It helps the algorithm carry our stories to more historical romance lovers. Share it with someone who enjoys dukes, defiant heroines, buried betrayals, and second chances. Subscribe to Secrets of Belgrave and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next full story. And tell us in the comments. Should Beatrice have given Nathaniel a second chance, or would you have signed the separation papers?